I'm Gerassimos from the European Commission. Unfortunately, I have a cold, as you can probably hear, so I hope I'll manage to speak clearly. We have three distinguished guests today on the panel. We have Monica Frassoni, President of the EU Alliance to Save Energy and President of the Greens in the European Parliament. Paul Voss, Managing Director on her left on Euroheat and Power, and Wendel Trio, Director of Climate Action Network Europe. So we will run three panels this afternoon. We will try to remain very disciplined in time. So we have run a bit late because of the morning session. So I estimate to keep every panel discussion for about 20 minutes. Each speaker will say a 3-minute introduction statement, and then we will enter into some discussion with the panel. The first session is on the moderation of energy demand. It has been mentioned several times this morning by Vice President Šefčovič, by Mr. Cañete, with specific initiatives on energy demand. When I introduced the issue to the speakers, I said this is an issue that everybody agrees that it has to be done. The question is how. So let's see now if they agree that the issue is the how and not the if. So I'll ask first Monica Frassoni to give us your thoughts, and then I will move on with Paul and with Wendel. Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I put a chronometer so I know more or less how long I speak. Yes, hello everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I think, first of all, that the discussion about energy efficiency should not be done in isolation from what is going on in the world and above all in Europe today. Not very far from here there is a war looming, and in Athens hundreds of thousands of people are in the street. And not only in Athens. So I think that the answer that we give to the energy issue is also very much linked to the answer we give to what is the sense of Europe today and also where we want to go in terms of economic recovery. So I think that if we are serious about wanting the Riga process to be remembered, we have to give substance and understanding to the two words, energy union. So first of all, we need energy, meaning that we need a clarity about the direction we want energy choices to make, which means that we have to get rid of fallacious concepts like technologic neutrality. So I think that this is really a priority that, at least among ourselves, energy freaks, we should accept. Besides, and I must say that today, besides some very interesting points done on energy efficiency, saying that it has to be really important, what I gathered is that there is the highest interest is unfortunately still put in making the energy union a place where it is possible to buy gas at cheap prices or to build big infrastructure. And I don't think that this is consistent with making energy efficiency the first priority. So we have two very simple proposals to make in order to be serious and consistent with this idea of energy efficiency first. The first is just check. Every time you have a brilliant idea about building a pipeline or making a shale gas investment, check if it is not better in terms of timing, in terms of job creation, in terms of energy saved, to invest in energy efficiency, in transport, in industry, in buildings. I bet that it is almost always better, but I may be proved wrong. So energy efficiency testing, energy saving test is really something that has to be connected with everything else that you do. Otherwise, it remains really empty words. The second is implementation. We have today a big, let's say a serious, if not big, a key of legislation and eco-design, EDD, some others. Well, I believe that the signals are that all this legislation is under attack under a national point of view, implementation point of view, and is under attack also within the Commission, because a lot of people believe that these kind of instruments are too heavy. And I think that we have really to save soldier legislation. And I believe that this is certainly something very important. Second issue that we have to make sure it exists when we are talking about the energy union is union. And whether we like it or not, I mean, I am not surprised that the Norwegian minister says that he wants light touch. His people defeated the entry in the European Union twice. So of course he doesn't want to have legislation. But we are in the European Union. And whether we like it or not, the only thing that worked, the only way we made history was when we were united with legislation, targets and money. And unless we don't have this, in energy efficiency, but also in renewables, I don't think that we are going to be coherent with our objective to keep the climate at 2 degrees and also to get out of this economic crisis. And it's also a crisis about what kind of products we can offer to consumers and to citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you for keeping also to the time. Interesting points. I will ask Paul now to touch on another issue. It's on district heating. Why don't you make some introductory remarks on this issue, and then we will engage to link the issues in the discussion.
Hi, good afternoon. I've been thinking the last hours and even days about what it is that we mean with this term, energy union, and I can't pretend to say that I've fully worked it out yet. But what I will say is I'm excited, and I think a lot of people are excited, maybe after a while of not being excited about European energy policy again. I don't know how many people called me yesterday asking me about this version of the document that's going around. How many people want to talk about energy policy again? I got so excited I was almost on Twitter. And for me that's really something special, and I'd like to thank the Commission for making this step and putting climate and energy where it belongs again at the center of the European project. The other thing I'm excited about at the moment is in the energy union discussion and more generally in EU energy policy, I see this emerging conversation about heat. It's something that I think is long overdue, and it's something that will, I think, give us a richer and better plan for our energy transition. We might think there's no need to worry about this. We're actually very good at generating heat in Europe. So maybe you might think there's nothing to be done. But I think we have a small problem with the way that we do it for the moment. Think about how we provide heat right now. We go out into the world, we look for some oil or some gas somewhere. We find a way to stick it into a boat or a pipeline, and we bring it back and we get into people's houses and we burn it. For me, that fails a number of tests. It fails a climate test. It fails an energy security test, and if I look at Europe's fuel bill every month, it fails an economic test as well. So I think something's got to be done about this. It's important. And Monica was speaking very eloquently about the idea of efficiency. I'd like to talk even more specifically about maybe another front in the war on waste. I'd just like to talk for a second about what goes on with heat in our cities. What do we do to heat our cities? Well, we do what we do everywhere else for the most part. We go out into the world and we look for some oil or some gas and we put it into a boat or a pipe and we bring it back and we put it in people's houses and we burn it. Meanwhile, in any city you might care to look at, you will find freely available sources of low carbon heat, whether it's surplus heat from our industries. You know, I heard the other day we're getting tropical fish appearing off the coast of Dublin because we dump so much waste heat into the sea. That's a problem. There's renewable heat all around us, directly under our feet sometimes. And if we leave it under the ground and opt instead to burn some gas, we're missing a major opportunity. You know, my mum, like a lot of English people, was a very good cook. And one of the things I loved most about her cooking was the way she could take what we had and make something of it. She'd open that fridge and find what was in there and make something. And I think that there's a lesson for us to learn about using what we have. District energy is all about this. It's about building a bridge between locally available resources and the places nearby where it's needed. And if we can do that, again, we're going to find a better energy union. And I think somehow this idea, this spirit of relying on the things that we have, investing in local infrastructure instead of spending on imported fuel, I would like to think that this is somehow also the spirit of this energy union that we're discussing. You know, vision instead of fear, planning instead of hoping. And if this is the idea, if this is the spirit that we're discussing, then I'm right to be excited about the energy union. I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful, I'm ready to contribute, and I'm also finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So, Wendel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this issue. Clearly for us, energy consumption reduction is an important element of this energy union, which is as such, the energy union, an important tool to achieve our long-term climate objectives. I mean, what we want is actually to prevent dangerous climate change, and the European Union, and it later on has convinced the rest of the world, has said that is ensuring that temperature rise stays below 2 degrees. Now, to achieve that, we will need to move away from fossil fuels. We will need to get Europe out of fossil fuels by the middle of this century and move towards a fully renewable energy-based energy system. And in order to do that, we will need to reduce the energy that we consume. We will need to strongly reduce that. That's the first thing. And how we do that, there's not one single policy tool that we need to have for that, and we shouldn't exclude any of the policy tools. We will need a basket, a combination of policy tools and approaches. It starts with setting targets. It's clear that in the past in Europe and still now, binding targets at the national level are working. They have proven to be working both for greenhouse gas emission reductions and for renewable energy production. So also for really reaping the possibilities of energy efficiency, we need to think about setting binding targets. Secondly, it's about implementing the rules that we've set. Clearly, it's about implementation of the target that we have for 2020, and we're still quite a while to go. We're currently at more or less minus 12% in terms of energy consumption. It's 8% to go for reaching the 20% indicative target on energy savings. But we need the continuation of that also after 2020. So it's very clear what Monica said, that we need to work on this governance system that ensures that we set targets, but that we also implement them. Thirdly, we need to be ambitious. The current 2030 indicative EU target for energy savings is minus 27%, while many researchers have proven that actually the potential is there for Europe to reduce its energy consumption by at least 40% by 2030 as compared to the benchmarks that has been set, which is also the position that the European Parliament has supported, for instance. So also there, I think, as part of this energy union, Europe will need to rethink, did we take the right decision when our leaders made that decision in October last year of setting a minus 27% target. We need price signals. So we definitely, as has been said multiple times before, we definitely need a reform, and a stringent reform of the emission trading scheme, which will actually also need a revision of our ambition in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Because if there's one thing that the current problems with ETS is showing, it is that the market goes much faster than politicians sometimes are willing or daring to do. And we've actually already reached our target in the emission trading scheme, which is why the market doesn't function anymore. Next to price signals, we actually need investments. We need a clear, coherent approach with all the different budgets that the European Union is making available in coordination with the IEB and the Juncker package, and all of that need to be streamlined so that it really supports energy demand reduction. And finally, we need more than technology. I think that's one of the main messages I want to give. One of the big challenges of reducing our energy consumption lies with changing consumption patterns. It's a challenge. It's not something that will only be done by price signals. It's not something that will only be done by setting rules. It will need more effort, and that's something that this energy union exercise should spend time on.
Thank you very much. So quite a wide range of issues around reducing energy demand. I have 5 points, don't miss 2020, check first, legislate more, Monica at least, and be visionary, ambitious and hopeful, and then you need money. Sort of everybody goes around these 5 points. I am surprised, just to be provocative, nobody mentions transport. Let's say I wanted to see if you have in the panel some discussions about the role of transport. And also, nobody mentioned sort of the buildings. We have put in our discussions a lot of emphasis in energy efficiency in buildings, and this includes potential new legislation on public buildings. So I would like to raise these two issues and have your views on the role of transport in reducing energy demand and what we can do with buildings. Who wants to take the floor? Please.
Yes.
Wendel.
I will start with transport. So yes, I mean, all of those sectors are very important, and we will need approaches that are specifically to specific sectors. I think the transport sector clearly is a good example for some of the things I said. We need clearer rules to make vehicles more efficient. Clearly, the European Union has taken a number of steps, but it definitely can go much, much further. We also need clearly the right incentives, not only to have cleaner cars, but also to have less cars on the road, so that we change the way we move ourselves or we move goods. But also we need the right incentives. I mean, if we want to shift to electrical cars, for instance, which is, when we speak about long-term decarbonization, probably the only alternative in terms of fueling the transport system, that will need support for research and innovation and so on. So all of those elements actually apply to all of the sectors, and in particular also to transport.
Yeah, very briefly, first of all, you have traffic jams also of electric cars. So I think that the problem of congestion and the kind of cities we want to live do not only depend from the emissions that the car emit. So I think that that is also a question that is quite important. I just want to say something about money. I think that it is a fantastic reading to go and check out on the Court of Auditors report on the efficiency of the energy efficiency funds in the last period. They said disastrous. My country, Italy, didn't spend 70% of the funds, European funds, devoted to energy efficiency. And I think that there is a lot of attention from the part of the Commission and of some member states. Latvia, for example, asked in the framework of the Juncker plan for 2 billion, he considered that the priority was actually energy efficiency in buildings, and asked for a contribution of 400 million euros in order to be able to foster 2 billion euros investment. So I think that money is probably not enough, but is there and it is not used. So there is an issue for the Commission to get their acts together and try to coordinate better the instruments, and we are working actually with the different DGs of the Commission to do that, but also for banks and member states to really go on a clear line about not to waste money, above all because it's there. But in order to do that, you cannot be ambiguous about regulation and about implementation. And I'm sure that all of us will agree that today there are really two mixed messages that are given in this respect. And therefore I go back to my previous point, priorities must be much clearer in order to be efficient on efficiency.
Well, I would like to make a last point, and probably Paul also to pick up on this, is the energy efficiency schemes is one area, for example, where the financing is local, the action is local. In district heatings, I think also it's an area where different models are being, used in different countries in order to be more efficient in district heating. What I wanted to see is how we can see some kind of scalability, because at the moment we are still at this stage of collecting good examples and best, let's say, practices. Is it possible to scale up? Are we at the stage that we can scale up, or we are still at the stage that we can collect small good initiatives? Paul.
Yeah, if I could, I'd like to briefly return to your last question when you mentioned that no one mentioned buildings, because I think it's really important. First of all, Monica briefly did. Second, I'd like to say that when I talk about heat, in a very real way, I'm actually talking about buildings. These two things really cannot be separated. When we talk about energy efficiency in buildings, what we need to be thinking about is, one, how to reduce the demands of that building, and two, how to meet the demand that still is there in a way that is efficient and low carbon. So I just wouldn't like the idea of heat to be lost or the idea of buildings to be lost when we talk about the other. They really have to form part of a whole.
Okay.
There is one example, sorry. There are a couple of examples that we have been coming across about this question of scale. For example, there is a big project in the Netherlands, if I'm not wrong, which is going up to, to a lot of money. And there are also some other examples in France which are exactly trying to address this question. And in the Juncker plan, if you go through the list, you will see some attempt to scale up, because indeed the European Investment Bank is friendly with big stuff and big plants, and we don't want big plants. So I think that that is an issue for the energy efficiency community to become better in presenting the case for big scale projects of small and very interesting for individuals issues concerning energy efficiency.
Thank you very much. I think we covered a lot of ground. I would suggest that we applaud the panelists and we move to the next session. Thank you. So, so I would like to call on Kristian Ruby from Wind Energy Association, Oliver Scheffer from European Photovoltaic Industry Association, and Jean-Pol Poncelet from Foratom to join the panel. They have to decide the order. There are no female member in between. So, okay. So I think that the decarbonization of the energy mix is another big challenge who links in a certain way the energy union with our climate change agenda, as all of the issues that we are discussing, but this is a more explicit link. So I would like to ask first Kristian to make a couple of remarks about the role and the developments in the wind area, and then Oliver on solar, and then photovoltaic, and then nuclear, which is the old low carbon, let's say, technology. Please, Kristian.
Thank you. Well, a couple of remarks on decarbonization seen from a wind perspective. First of all, we're of course very thrilled and hopeful about the whole project of an energy union. The decarbonization part, of course, is one of the ones which interests us a lot. We get so used to talking about decarbonization that we sometimes forget just how fundamental a transformation of the energy system that is. Just to recall some of the fundamental numbers here, by mid-century, a decarbonization of the European energy system would imply a share of wind in the power system between 30% and 50%. So 30 to 50% of all electricity coming from wind by 2050. Now that's not the pipe dream of a lobbyist, that is the numbers of the Commission from the Energy Roadmap from 2011. So what does that require? Essentially it means that we're looking at an energy system that will be fundamentally transformed, where the notion of baseload needs to be changed fundamentally. And it means we basically need to design the energy system to this new reality. It also means that we have to make a lot of investments. The IEA estimates that we're going to need around $1 trillion from now to 2020. So you can see over the length of the period, that's going to be a lot of money. Needless to say, that's not going to come from the Commission or these cash-strapped member states. It needs to come from private investors. And so we need to get things right in order for that money to flow. And I believe we need three things here. First of all, we need to get fundamentals right. Secondly, we need to get prices right. And finally, we need to get incentives right. So the fundamentals are, of course, about the interconnections. We need interconnectors to get that real internal market for energy working. Secondly, it's about the legal certainty. We believe that a 2030 target needs to be enshrined in legislation, and that the governance system eventually also needs to be of a clear legal nature. Secondly, about the prices, well, the shift we're going to see is from a system with fossil fuel costs, hence fuel costs, and hence relatively high marginal prices. We're moving to a system with renewables that have virtually no marginal costs. So we cannot base the future price structure of this system on the marginal cost alone. That's going to give us problems. So we need to have a price structure, a market design that reflects the cost, the capital cost of these investments we need to make. And finally, of course, we need to get incentives right, and that is about getting a right carbon price signal. Without a fundamental reform of the ETS and one that goes way beyond the market stability reserve, we cannot see that investments are going to flow in the amounts that we will need to have this transformation made in time. So these would be 3 priorities of the wind industry for this energy union.
Thank you, Kristian. Oliver?
Well, I could just replace wind with solar and compliment here, but I won't. So, but I totally agree with what was said. And the energy union concept, I mean, has a lot of nice, interesting ideas in it, but it's lacking vision, and this limits it again. We try to squeeze in new technologies into a 100-year-old system. That doesn't work. If we had done that 100 years ago, when we have developed cars, we would have cars, but they would drive behind horse wagons. If we had done that with telecommunications 25 years, we would still be fixed on landlines. So we cannot just say, like, we try to squeeze in the new technologies in this old system. What we try at the moment is we try to protect the past instead of shaping the future. And the future looks different. The future is not based on a baseload concept that is baseload defined by coal and nuclear plants. They need to run to make money 24 hours. No, we need to redefine that. Baseload in future will be when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. In addition to that, we need flexible technologies and not old, inflexible technologies. Flexible technologies could come from hydro, could come from storage, demand-side management, or even gas for quite a while to come that is flexible. And if you replace coal, particularly, with other technologies, you go a long way to a much lower carbon energy system. So we need to then also redefine the way how markets are structured. Yes, the cost structure cannot be based on marginal cost anymore when you have technology is 50, 60, 70% like wind and solar with no marginal cost, so that all doesn't make sense anymore. And there is a reason why no company makes money on certain market conditions at this moment, because the market as it is shaped, the frameworks for the markets are just not working for our new technologies. So I think we should fundamentally restructure the way the market works. Remunerate no marginal cost CO2-free technologies that are variable but predictable, and remunerate the flexibility that other sources can deliver. So tackle the way market design is reached. So don't try to incorporate new technologies and a 100-year-old system and technologies. No, we need to switch off certain technologies and switch in new ones.
Okay, quite a radical approach to on this. Jean-Pol.
Thank you. I would like basically to make 2 points. The first one will bring us back to discussion this morning, because I think we experienced this morning a very fascinating demonstration of selective memory. When there were, of course, EU energy union is a brand interesting concept, but we did it 60 years ago, by the way, for a part explained this morning, but it's strange that they just forgot to quote that the nuclear energy community, which was created 60 years ago, and which delivered many successes. Let me tell you that we currently have a pooling system where all resources are pooled at EU level. We have a supply agency which monitors, controls, authorizes all the supply contracts. You cannot sign a contract without the green light of the supply agency. It's planning investment. They are sharing safety and non-proliferation concerns. They are supporting research and development, and this has brought us 30% of the electricity produced in the EU. Can you, 1 minute, imagine what could the EU be today if we had similar systems in the oil and the gas industry, with one single supply agency speaking with one voice with the producers from abroad, etc. That's exactly the measure of what we didn't do in the last 60 years. So back to the energy concept, that's my second point. Of course, it's fine. And we do agree on the principles that we heard today. But the first point is, do we do this following the market-based economy? That's what I understood. Okay, so good, so far so good. We follow the market rules. But can we do this with 28 member states policy and member states energy mixes choices? Can we do this with 28 regulators? Can we do this with the subsidies we are already experiencing in the system, with too few interconnections, with climate change constraint, and how to tackle energy poverty? So I'm back to this basic question. Of course, there is a decision that we would follow market rules. I have my doubt about this. But if we do this, I think the first thing we have to do is, if we are serious about climate change, and that carbon is the cause of this, we have to ban carbon. So we need a strong signal, price signal on carbon, not an ETS system at €5, but a strong and effective and sustainable price signal on carbon. If ETS cannot provide it, we have to change the system. Once we have this, then I think the goal, and we share this indeed, we need a level playing field for investment. All the technologies, low carbon technologies today, are characterized by the very high upfront capital cost. How to invest, how to organize industry and to make them able to invest under the current market arrangement, it's just impossible. So how to allow for this long-term investment? There are some solutions. Long-term contracts, contracts for difference, shared ownerships, take-off schemes, many of them. And by the way, I'm happy to notice that the contract for difference created in the UK under the energy market reforms have been blessed by the European Commission, including the current Vice President. So that's a way to demonstrate that there are tracks to solve this need for long-term investment and consolidate this investment. And my last point is the following. Back to the Euratom Treaty, and that's a call to the European Commission. You do have a system, a provision under the Euratom Treaty. There is a provision which I would not dare to say instruct you, but enables you to plan the investment for the next years. It's called PING, which is an acronym for Indicative Investment Program of Nuclear. You have the tool, the legal provision to do is, please come with such a proposal so that we would have a view on the next 10 or 20 years and discuss how to do these investments that we need. Thank you.
Okay, I think this, thank you, Jean-Pol. I think this is an area where the breadth of issues is not as big as it was in the previous session, but I think the tension between the issues is probably deeper. So, sorry. So I think what is common in all the intervention is that, you know, there is an element of research, technology, and innovation going forward. Innovation in terms of hard, let's say, hardware, but also innovation in terms of thinking and in terms of integrating the different sources into the market. I think I would like, however, to go a little bit more into the pricing of carbon. There was mentioned a little bit here and there. Kristian mentioned that, you know, we need the market stability reserve. Jean-Pol mentioned that we need a real price of carbon. I mean, what are the views of the panel? Is the market stability reserve enough? Will it deliver the expected results? Do we need to go beyond that? And what is the panel's view on the ETS versus non-ETS sectors? I mean,
well, we believe that it's a lot about the modalities, whether or not the market stability reserve is going to be a success or not. In any case, we do not see the market stability reserve as the permanent fix to the ETS. With or without market stability reserve, we'll have a structural surplus of allowances that needs to be dealt with. We need to look at the linear reduction factor. It needs to be corrected. We need to go even steeper towards 2050. And we need to, even in the light of such a reform, we would need to see what is actually left in terms of surplus allowances. Because without a carbon price signal of somewhere between 30 and 40 euros, it is not really going to be a relevant instrument. It would have to come up in that range in order to really be a decisive factor when it comes to triggering a fuel shift in the energy market.
Oliver?
Well, I mean, the answer is easy. The system doesn't work at the moment, so it doesn't deliver what we expect from the system. So, yes, structures have to be changed. It has to be modified, and seriously, I mean, fundamentally changed and modified. And carbon has to get a price if we want to go forward. I mean, I totally agree with you here on that.
Well, as far as I know, there was a decision by member states to follow that track. So now we have it. Let's try to do it, to have it working. And working, again, I mean, it's not €5. It's a significant price signal that we so far missed in the system. So the question is, first, we need an EU-wide system as much as possible. How to imagine that there would be a carbon tax in a single country and not in another one? This would create exactly the opposite of what we are looking for. But if collectively at 28 we are enabled to significantly and deeply change the system or update it so that it is effectively working, I'm afraid this opens the way for any single member state to create its own system. And I think this is exactly what we should avoid. So it's up to the decision makers, the Commission and the EU institutions to demonstrate that they have leadership in this question. And again, especially from industry, not just saying it's 6 or 10 euro, a timeline and a perspective with an increasing system, similar to what the British government was planning to introduce, with some figures of about £30 that they considered in the past. So what are the provisions? A timeline and actual figures on it. That's what we need.
Okay, thank you. Jean-Pol, can I ask you then also to react on the suggestion and the introductory remarks by Oliver on the way that we need to deal with base load versus non-base load, or the new base load as it was decided, as it was branded. Oliver claims that, you know, there is no way to go forward in the long term by just trying to integrate the variable with the...
He was referring to new technologies, and I'm proud to say that nuclear is a new technology and not an old one, because we are improving the effectiveness, the use of uranium, new design, new reactors, so I'm fine with this. So far, I never was convinced by any scenario at 2050 without nuclear, and once you keep the goals, if you really want to decarbonize, so far I never saw a credible scenario without a contribution of nuclear. And by the way, that's exactly the position of the nuclear industry. We are not providing the solution to everything, we are just a part of the solution.
Oliver.
I have agreed on a couple of things with you already. I think I need to stop that now. I'm glad you mentioned subsidies, because I guess we cannot afford nuclear anyway. So, because without massive subsidies all over the time, and in the past and in the present, I'm just referring to the 2 reactors that are built in Europe, overshooting the price targets by, I don't know how many 100%. But nuclear, the point is nuclear is inflexible. I mean, coal is dirty and inflexible. Nuclear at least is CO2 clean, but also inflexible. And I said, when you want to have a goal of 60-70% wind and solar, you cannot cope with 30% of inflexible technologies as a rest. You need 30% of flexible technologies. And this is why I believe we also need to rethink the concept of the nuclear future.
Yes.
No, I'm ready. Thank you. I'm ready to discuss this. First, let's have a look at what was already achieved in Europe. 25 billion a year to support wind and PVs just only in Germany. So that's the cost of the system. Secondly, back to nuclear, you know, when there is a decision to switch off or phase out nuclear and replace these capacities by renewables with backup equivalent to the power that was missed, at the end of the day, you end up with an increase of the carbon emissions. So I think that kind of policy is just stupid. We have to join the efforts and join all the low carbon technologies, PVs, wind, nuclear, hopefully once a day, a future day CCS, if we can achieve it, And if you look at the actual figures, I think we will need all of these efforts together to reach the goal that we are aiming at. And that's why we think the problem is not to oppose the energy sources, but to join them to reach the goal together.
Okay, I don't want to reignite fighting. I think one issue that I'm let's say the last issue I would like to raise with this panel is storage. I think this is an area, let's say, a way by which one can deal with the variability. Is there any thoughts of the panel on the storage and the capacity to store? Kristian.
Yes, well, we of course are keenly interested in seeing the storage technology advancing. Contrary to what most people think, a lot of solutions are already out there, and it's really about just getting them the final, let's say, giving them the final push out into the market. But our approach to this transformation of the energy system, as I was saying before, is very much one where we take a holistic look at what needs to be done. We believe that a lot of complementary technologies are needed in order to fulfill this transformation. We believe storage is one of them. We also believe that the integration between the heating systems and the electricity systems is really important. The idea that we get an increasing amount of our heat from electricity. And of course, there's the whole electrification of the transport sector, which will also be an essential component in actually reaching a decarbonized energy mix.
Oliver?
I don't share the vision of some researchers that say wind, solar, plus some other renewables and storage is the solution. Storage will be part of the solution. Storage offers, as one technology, what is needed for variable but predictable sources like wind and sun as flexibility. This is where storage can play a role and will definitely play a role, but not back up the rest. So there will be from hydro to gas to demand side management, smart technologies. I mean, there's a reason why companies like Google and Facebook invest billions actually in energy software research and also hardware, because they will come up with solutions we don't think about today, how you can match supply and demand when necessary. So storage, one option that needs to be developed. At the moment it's even costly, but it will be reduced. I mean, like wind and solar 10 years ago was also costly, now it's pretty cheap, both of it. But just part of the solution.
Okay, thank you very much. Jean-Pol, you want something about storage?
Easy. I do agree with much of what has been said previously. I think we have to avoid looking for one single solution. There is no way to get an answer if we focus on one single solution. And hydro and wind, etc., they are technical perspectives for storing energy, at least for a limited period of time. My only point would be a technical one. There is, by the way, a very interesting feedback from the nuclear industry vis-à-vis the storage of renewable energy, because in thermal plants, I mean thermal solar plants, now we are planning to use molten salt and liquid metals as the cooling system, which have the availability, the capacity to store energy for some hours. And this, by the way, is a concrete possibility to overlook the cycling system of solar and having a thermal solar plant able to produce energy as a baseload system. So, again, a demonstration that there is no single solution, that we can learn from each other.
Okay, thank you very much. So, final agreement by the panel, all members of the panel. I would like to ask to thank the panel and then move on with the last panel on research. So our last session is on research and innovation. We have Marian Haug from the University of Hohenheim, Graham Sweeney from Zero Emissions Fossil Fuel Power Plants, and Stefan Blanklicht, who is Deputy Mayor of Delft. Okay, I mean, research and innovation has been mentioned throughout the day as one of the key areas. Probably the subject mentioned more along with the money part. Everybody has mentioned money throughout the day. So the second most quoted issue was research and innovation. So I think it's a good way to close this day and see what should be the priorities of the Energy Union with regards to research and innovation, where the accent should be, what is the role of research and innovation and the weight of research and innovation in our Energy Union, which is, let's remind ourselves, Energy Union is expected to deliver goods for many years to come. So, it's a long-term project. So, can I ask Marianne first to start with an introduction?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here today and to talk about research and innovation in the Energy Union, the fifth and, thank God, not forgotten pillar of the Energy Union. It's exactly 7 years ago that the Commission took a rather bold initiative to put together a strategic energy technology plan and pulling together the many research institutes in Europe, which beforehand had really refused to collaborate constantly, and also created the platforms for energy technology platforms and the energy industry initiative, of which Dr. Sweeney here is one of the representatives. And at the same time, as you heard before, new funds were made available. At the time, 2007, 2008, we were in clean energy technology at the forefront. We were the early movers, whether it was nuclear, CCS, biofuels, renewable. You would see that really we were the first to provide both ambitious targets and had the technology in moving ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, despite of some of the things you heard today, this is no longer true. We have a declining portion of patents. We have a declining portion of market shares across the board. The only technology which can just hold itself again still is probably wind. For all the rest, others have woken up of the market potential in clean energy. Not that we had been sleeping, just the contrary. When you look what we have been doing in Europe, it was certainly not business as usual. We have done more, and for example, Horizon 2020 has doubled the research funds for clean energy. And nevertheless, we are no longer leader in clean energy technology. So we have to ask ourselves, what have we to do in the future? One thing which is very clear when following the discussions here is that we are focused on meeting the energy goals and targets of the EU. That's a laudable objective. That's why we are here. However, if you look back and see that Europe accounts for less than 15% of the world's energy consumption and less of 12% of greenhouse gas emissions, what we are doing is rearranging the sandbox. The question which we have to ask ourselves, should we use research and technology in order to service the global market? If we are really serious about decarbonization, it cannot be to only do 40% less of our 12% share. We have to use green growth. We have to use our quite substantial research and technology capacity and human brains and industry ingenuity to be competitive in the global market. But that means we have to look not just meeting our European targets, but to have green codes and an innovation and industrial policy. It is a different outlook than what we have heard here today. And I mean from CCS to biofuels to renewables and to probably also nuclear. We are no leader anymore. So looking ahead it is really not just looking at our little sandbox in Europe, but at the international market. And that's what our competitors are doing, and that's what we have to do for renewable if we really want to do what President Juncker has been saying, namely become a world leader in renewable energy. I know there are people out there who are saying, we are importing textiles, why shouldn't we import all the components of renewable energy from Asia? They can do it better. We have to be careful. Energy is an essential good. It's not just some running shoes. That's my first point. However, I have two other points which I want to share with you at this point in time. First, internal market. You have heard this morning that we are making quite a bit of progress, and ACE and ENSO are doing a great job. And we will have more regulation packages from the Commission, and more will have to be done. But as you heard in some of the discussions, we need flexibility in the system. Will really this be done by the regulator? Can we really trust that the market somehow will arrange the wholesale electricity market? Research and innovation is here to really guide the Commission, the countries, the energy unit with system integration studies, independent and objective, and not just taking into account the big regions, but really taking in 100% of the energy unit. So system integration, modeling and studies must be the research and innovation contribution to the unfolding of the internal energy market. And the same is true for storage technologies and the storage integration in the system. Up till now, the value proposition of storage is not clear because it is regulation dependent and therefore has to be studied in much more depth. The third point I would like to make is regarding energy efficiency, and you had quite a number of very, very useful contribution with some of the other speakers. But also in this respect, I would suggest we should be looking also at the contribution of research and innovation studies. We have been preaching now for many years on energy efficiency, get the prices right, get the regulations, and I agree with Monica, when she was saying we have to really be clear. But we also know, after being clear what the regulations are and where the prices should be, there is a socio-economic behavioral component on energy efficiency, which is very different in different countries, and so are the technologies. More work, socio-economic work, has to be done in order to get to the how to be effective in buildings, in dealing with behavior of people to get results. I believe we have not done and have not prevailed ourselves with the consumer research, which we should be doing, primarily in the 30–40% of countries which are not the usual suspect. There is a huge gap, and the European Union can really focus on disseminating best practices, but then fill the gap of research in the remaining countries where such research, particularly behavioral research, has not yet been done. The European Union is a wonderful instrument of finally reaching out to 100% of the EU 28 members. And I believe also that the set plan, Horizon 22, give at least a stepping stone for this research and innovation work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Marian. Interesting points. We'll take some of the time out of your second intervention. So, I think the last point links well with the potential intervention by Stefan, because you mentioned the citizens, the consumers. So I think it's good to have an experience from somebody who is very close to the citizens from the city of Delft. So, Stefan, can you give us
Yes,
your
thank you. I'm very glad I can speak here, not so much on behalf of the city of Delft, but also as Energy Cities and the Covenant of Mayors, because the voice of cities and towns has not been heard today yet. And I think it's vital that we hear it. A future-proof, democratic and prosperous and secure energy union is foremost a locally rooted union. And research and innovation in the fields of technology, governance and finance should also serve these four principles. And I will elaborate a bit more on those principles. At first, a future-proof energy union should be grounded in today's reality. It should reflect the ongoing transition towards even more distributed and decentralized energy systems. New organizational models have emerged everywhere across Europe, where local authorities are involving citizens, cooperatives, local businesses and stakeholders to contribute to a low-carbon, decentralized energy systems. The ongoing transformation of the European energy sector has been overwhelmingly carried out by local authorities, which play a leading role in scaling up the energy efficiency technologies and renewable energy deployment. So, such future-oriented systems should form the backbone of the energy union. It should also be democratic. A genuine energy union cannot be imposed only top-down. To reinforce European cohesion and solidarity, it should be based on a multi-level governance. It should draw the Covenant of Mayors, which demonstrates cooperation between all government levels, local, regional and national. It should rely on local authorities' capacity to put all local stakeholders around the table, to empower citizens, to invest in renewable energy and change lifestyles and behaviors. We heard that also before. Innovation should not merely be technology-oriented. With the challenges we are facing, we need process innovation. And cities are at the helm of this, playing an instrumental role in the development of the innovative participation schemes. So the energy union should be based on hopeful and inclusive policies to improve the quality of life and to fight energy poverty. We have heard that before as well. The Member of Parliament, Jerzy Buzek, said energy should be a driver of European prosperity. A prosperous energy union should be based on decentralized, sustainable energy policies, as they alone can feed the local economy. They foster new business models and job-intensive sectors and activity, redirecting European money to European territory. Local authorities are best placed to manage demand and optimize energy flows on their territories in a way that increases local revenues and reduces needs for costly energy investments. And local authorities have also set up innovative investment schemes. And it may also be a good idea to take apart a portion of the Juncker plan, the investment plan, just for energy efficiency investments, say about, well, 50 billion out of the 300 might be a nice portion to begin with. And at last, the Energy Security Union. Energy systems relying on local renewable energy sources are more resilient in the face of supply disruptions. The optimization of local resources has the potential to dramatically slash the EU import of gas. We heard that before. We can all, let alone the Russian gas import, just by reducing our demand. And in the end, the Covenant of Mayors plays a huge role in this respect. According to an analysis by the Joint Research Center, a staggering 58% of gas consumption in 6 of the EU most energy-dependent countries, that is the Baltics, Finland, Slovakia and Bulgaria, has expected to be saved through the implementation of the city's sustainable energy action plans. So we're offering 6,000 signatories, so please make use of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think it's in this session on research and innovation, I didn't expect to hear so much about socioeconomic, so much about poverty, and but I think it shows how the breadth of the research elements that are needed as part of the Energy Union. The last speaker of today is Graham, who is, I think, is focusing more on the technical side of the research. So you want to, is a big expert in carbon capture and storage, and I'm sure he wants to say something about this, potentially also for other issues. Yes, please.
Thank you, and it's good to be here this afternoon. So I think I wanted to start by welcoming the direction of travel in the Energy Union towards a more systemic review of energy issues than what's required to meet our multiple goals. I wanted to absolutely endorse Marian's point that energy policy can't be separated from industrial policy. Much of what you do, the two things become linked together, and the matter of growth and jobs are properly considered as we make our energy policy directions. Yeah, we're enthusiastic members of the Strategic Energy Technologies Plan. I'm an enthusiastic member of the European Industrial Initiatives. And I note that on the matter of CCS, here we are off the pace, notwithstanding all the work that's been done in the UK. And the Canadians have gone ahead and built one while we've been talking about whether we should build any. So they're opening up a range of optionality. So they have a commercial scale plant that commenced operation at the back end of last year. We promised ourselves we were going to do a lot, and we haven't done so much. So what do we need to do that's different? So I think the first thing we have to do is we have to set our direction of travel here in the context of our 2050 objectives. Our 2050 objectives are a comprehensive, economy-wide decarbonisation. Not decarbonisation in the energy system, but economy-wide. And so we need to think about what the optionalities are that will deliver that for us so that we get the right research and innovation. Because innovation is about carrying technology to the actual workplace to deliver value. So we need to decarbonise a whole bunch of industrial applications, as well as the energy system. So I want to make 2 points in favour of having a research and innovation programme that delivers value through CCS. First of all, it reaches parts of the system that other parts of the technology groups can't. It deals with the matter of process emissions in steel and iron and aluminium and cement. I believe we want to keep those industries in Europe for the jobs that they represent. And they have very little optionality to deliver decarbonisation without CCS. And the second thing I want to do is to talk about affordability. So like the previous panel, I believe that the 2050 energy system is going to be all of the above. It's going to have a very significant and very desirable, both decentralised and some more centralised renewable components. I believe that it will have to have a clearly different market structure. And I believe that there will be an enduring role for fossil fuels and for nuclear all the way through this period. So why do I think that? Because I think dividing things between renewables and not renewables is unhelpful. We need to think about dispatchable energy and non-dispatchable energy, and there are examples of both in each of these camps. Then we need to think about affordability and about what happens as we deeply decarbonise. And the core issue is this. All of the modelling says that you want a significant CCS component to reduce your costs. of meeting those deep decarbonisation targets. Between 2 and 4 trillion is to be saved by having a significant component of CCS. So that's why it's worthwhile pursuing the goal. It's not instead of the other things, it's as a complement to them for delivering an executable system at the lowest affordable cost. So if we build through that, it's the what do we want out of all of this? Well, we need an ambitious milestone for 2030. We need, indeed, to get the ETS to work. We need electricity market reform. And we would like to see an innovation fund brought into play. But you know, the thing we need most of all is to replicate what we've done on electricity and gas networks and to focus on how we can build out from regional initiatives a CO2 transportation network that can connect industrial sources and power plants with an appropriate set of stores so that we have this optionality in place by 2030 to enable us to reach those parts of the systems that can't be reached otherwise and to create an affordable overall decarbonisation plan that protects our economic welfare going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I think that we have, let's say, a variety of interventions. I think that from the panel, I'll take the need to, first of all, compare to the interventions of the whole day, to look, to keep in mind the external dimension of our European Union policy, and not only in terms of securing supply, but in terms of exporting, let's say, our model, our technology, our research, our innovation. I think this is probably a message that has to be stronger going forward, because we keep, let's say, when talking external in the energy union, from time to time, we just tend to think only the supply of a specific energy source. I think that the role of regulators in integrating the sources keeps coming up as an issue, you know, including in research. So it is an issue in all the discussions we had throughout the day. But Marian, let's say, highlights that this is still an issue on which research has to play a particular role. I mean, the importance of the Covenant of the Mayors, it was mentioned this morning by the Vice President, the Commissioner. I think not only by putting the consumer at the end, but specifically building on the authorities and the mayors. I think the test I would put here, and I wanted to hear your comments, is how we can scale up the initiatives. Is it enough? How this bottom-up will build up? Can we do, what can we do to make sure that we take this demand from bottom-up and bring it forward? Because we heard from Monica in just this afternoon, 2 sessions ago, that, you know, authorities have difficulties absorbing the money, dealing with energy efficiency. It might not be the money, it might be legal issues, it might be regulatory issues, but somehow we have best practices, individual examples, but we don't have, is there a consensus among your members coming up on how to deal? I would like to hear about this. And I think the last element, if I may, that I would like to, as a summary, is that, you know, the Graham comes with a specific point on how important CCS is, almost describing it as a glue to the whole strategy, or a necessary element to the whole strategy looking long term. Is it something that the other panelists agree that this is a necessary glue, or is it only a desirable glue? So I will ask first Stefan.
Well, first, the first point of the Covenant of Mayors, which has grown rapidly the last years to about 6,000 signatories. And now we have to do the next phase. And for that next phase, we need to have some more organization. So if some city or town has found something which works, then how other cities and towns will know that he has already invented that. So we are now at the moment that there is much innovation in different cities and towns, but at the same time the same innovations. So we should find a solution that what's innovated in one town is spread to the other. And therefore we must think how to go to the next phase in the Covenant of Mayors to make that more robust. In the field of CCS, I think it's part of the solution, it's part of the mix. But also I think if you store something, you store on the one hand because you don't want to have it in the air, or you store something because you want to have it for future use. And that's a part which I never heard before. So if we store it, yes, but what are we going to do with it? So can we find solutions, technologies to find a useful part of that of the carbon, for instance, in growing greenhouses? Well, they should use carbon. I come from Delft, that is between Rotterdam and The Hague, and there is being built or thought of being built a large heat network with CO2 coming from the harbor of Rotterdam at the same time. So there we can use directly the carbon for growing plants and vegetables instead of storage it.
Marianne?
If you follow today the discussion on energy efficiency, you probably have noticed that there were some who were saying, oh, this is a low-hanging food, that's very easy to do. And then there were others who are saying, oh my God, no, we haven't, as Monica said, dispersed all this money. And that is exactly why I said, here is an additional energy union area of research. Clearly, we have not found the solution of how to do energy efficiency. And why? Because we are preaching that it's so easy and that the consumer should realize that with a little bit of handouts of low-interest loans, they should do it. And they don't do it. So we really got the transaction costs wrong. And we have to ask ourselves to do exactly the same, which we have done in renewable energy, namely giving people rich returns. We are not giving appropriate returns for energy efficiency investments. So that has to be studied in much more detail because we do not know. And we are really giving not enough incentives for energy efficiency investments, at least for the built environment. For industry, it's a different matter, but for heating and cooling, we also haven't set the incentive yet. And that's the reason why I'm saying there is also a demand for additional research here. And we should stop to just preaching, get the prices right, and do the regulation. There's a gap of knowledge, which is country and region specific, and therefore so difficult to deal with. And only under the energy union, when we really focus that country by country and energy mix by energy mix, we have to ask ourselves, why do our people not take these interest-supported loans and get to new instruments? And I hope that in the next 2 years, we actually get to it.
Stephanie,
I want to reflect on that, why it's not happening. It's maybe because it's not offered the good services to the citizens. As long as the large energy companies think it's their business to sell energy, then we have a problem. They should sell a service. And they should sell the service, for instance, a warm home. And then that would include insulation of the homes. So it's a different thinking model and different business model, and you see that emerging, that new thinking for energy companies.
Ram?
So reflecting on the can distributed solutions make large-scale impact, well, I'm certain that they can. I think that we do need to address these things differently. So I suppose my way of saying what you said, Marianne, is that it's a bunch of engineers who designed the current system. And the lesson that I was taught, because I was categorized as an engineer, was that I didn't understand how people made decisions. And so I think that the best research in this area is going to include the socio-economic component of all of this. Where are the barriers? And lots of times there are things like, I don't want to do this because it looks like it's going to take 8 weeks. And during that 8 weeks, I won't be able to have the dog here, and we were going to go on holiday to the Bahamas anyway. So I'm not going to do it. And that is indeed not in the transaction cost. So how do we get to prioritization? How do you get things to trend, if you like, on Twitter so that everybody wants to do them? So having social science as the component of how you do that design seems to me to be absolutely essential. And I suppose my remark too is that in the research and innovation space, we need to look at these long-term decarbonisation pathways. And we need to be realistic about how we can make each of those components happen so that we get an executable plan, and that our medium-term goals reflect our long-term goals and the necessity of doing all of these pieces. And I don't think we've done that kind of holistic research, including the piece that says, how will it actually get delivered? And I think that we should prioritise the decarbonisation pathways, because I think we may be surprised about what it is we must have if we are to be successful.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that with this intervention we came to the end of this panel as well. I see here that the Vice President, the Minister is here. It was good that we didn't wait for the ministerial lunch to start, because everybody would have to leave. We had 3 very interesting panels here dealing with the reduction of energy demand, the decarbonization of energy mix, and research and development. And I would like to ask our host to close. Thank you very much. May I ask you to thank the panel? Thank you very much.